A man was reportedly moving from one parked vehicle to another, checking door handles. Someone noticed. A call was made to the Madison Police Department. Within minutes, officers arrived at the intersection of South Baldwin Street and Williamson Street. What happened next lasted only a matter of seconds. According to police, the encounter escalated rapidly. They say the man, later identified as 38-year-old Ruiz, produced a fixed-blade knife. But what really happened during those final moments? July 22, 2026. It was a warm Wednesday afternoon on Madison's Near East Side. People were enjoying lunch. Local businesses were open. Traffic moved steadily through Williamson Street as cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers went about their day. There was nothing to suggest that, within the next few minutes, this busy intersection would become the center of a tragedy that would capture national attention. At some point that afternoon, someone noticed a man moving from one parked vehicle to another. According to police, the individual appeared to be checking door handles on vehicles parked along the street. Concerned by what they had seen, a call was placed to the Madison Police Department. For the person making that call, it may have seemed like a routine report, the kind of call officers respond to every day. Within minutes, police officers arrived at the intersection of South Baldwin Street and Williamson Street. The man they encountered was 38-year-old Ruiz. Exactly what happened over the next few moments has become the focus of an independent investigation. Police say the encounter escalated rapidly. Members of the community have raised questions about how events unfolded, and investigators are now working to piece together every second of that encounter. Because before the videos, before the headlines, and before the public debate, there was an interaction between a man and responding officers. An interaction that would end in the loss of a human life. And to understand why this case has generated so much attention, we have to examine those final moments. Body camera footage has not yet been released publicly. What investigators know so far comes primarily from police statements and evidence gathered at the scene. According to Madison Police Chief John Patterson, officers approached Ruiz after receiving the report about someone checking parked vehicles. For a brief moment, it appeared to be another routine police encounter. Then everything changed. Police say Ruiz pulled out a fixed-blade knife. During the confrontation, one officer was reportedly injured. Another officer deployed a taser in an attempt to stop him. According to investigators, it had little effect. What happened next unfolded in seconds. A veteran Madison police officer fired his weapon. 3 shots were fired. When the gunfire stopped, Ruiz was lying on the pavement. Emergency medical personnel rushed to the scene and attempted to save his life. Their efforts were unsuccessful. Ruiz was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. For the officers involved, the encounter was over. For Ruiz's family, it was the beginning of a nightmare. Almost immediately, detectives secured the area. Crime scene tape surrounded the intersection. Witnesses were asked to remain nearby. Investigators began documenting every piece of evidence. But long before the investigation could gather momentum, another investigation had already begun, not inside a police station, but on the phones of people standing only meters away, people who had watched the aftermath, people who had started recording. And within hours, those recordings would spread across the internet, bringing the shooting far beyond the streets of Madison. As updates remained limited, frustration across Madison continued to grow. Within days, residents began gathering near the scene of the shooting. Some came carrying flowers. Others came carrying signs. Many simply wanted answers. What started as small gatherings quickly grew into organized demonstrations. Chants calling for justice echoed through the streets. Community leaders, activists, and ordinary residents demanded greater transparency as the independent investigation moved forward. The growing demonstrations also affected the city itself. Several public events were postponed or canceled as officials responded to the unrest and increasing public attention. By then, the death of Ruiz was no longer just a local police investigation. It had become a story that was drawing attention across Wisconsin and beyond. And for Ruiz's family, the fight for answers was only beginning. As demonstrations continued across Madison, Ruiz's family broke their silence. In a brief but emotional statement, they described as more than the headlines that now surrounded his name. To them, he was a son, a family member, someone whose life could not be reduced to the final moments of a police encounter. The family called for patience as the investigation moved forward, but they also made one thing clear. They wanted transparency, they wanted accountability, and above all, they wanted the truth. A few days later, another major development changed the direction
It just hurts so much knowing I can't see my father anymore.
Ben Crump. Over the years, Crump has represented families in some of America's most closely watched police shooting cases. His involvement immediately drew even greater national attention to what had happened in Madison. For many supporters, it was a sign that the family intended to pursue every legal avenue available. For others, it confirmed that the questions surrounding the shooting were far from settled. As investigators continued their work behind closed doors, the family prepared for a different battle, one that would unfold not only in the courtroom, but also in the court of public opinion. Whenever a police officer uses deadly force in Wisconsin, the investigation does not remain with the local police department. Instead, the Wisconsin Department of Justice's Division of Criminal Investigation, commonly known as the DCI, takes over. Their responsibility is to examine the evidence independently and determine exactly what happened. Within hours of the shooting, DCI investigators arrived in Madison. The intersection remained closed as detectives photographed the scene, collected physical evidence, and began interviewing witnesses. At the same time, the 4 officers involved in the incident were placed on administrative leave, following standard department policy. That decision is common after officer-involved shootings. It is not a finding of guilt or innocence. It simply removes the officers from active duty while the investigation continues. But for many people watching the case unfold, that explanation wasn't enough. Community members wanted more than procedure. They wanted answers. Questions quickly turned to transparency. Who were the officers involved? What exactly happened during those final seconds? Would body camera footage be released? And how long would the investigation take? For now, officials released only limited information, explaining that investigators needed time to complete their work before making further details public. That cautious approach is common in active investigations. But in cases already attracting national attention, silence often creates even more suspicion. As the days passed, the calls for accountability grew louder, not only from Corey Ruiz's family, but from a community determined to ensure that every question would eventually receive an answer. Today, the investigation into the death of Corey Ruiz remains ongoing. The Wisconsin Department of Justice continues to examine the evidence, interview witnesses, and reconstruct the events of that afternoon. Until that process is complete, many of the questions surrounding this case remain unanswered. For Corey Ruiz's family, no investigation can erase what happened on Williamson Street. No report can bring back a son, a relative, or a loved one. But they hope the investigation will provide something they believe every family deserves: the truth. For the Madison Police Department, the outcome of the investigation could shape public confidence for years to come. Every decision made, every piece of evidence reviewed, and every conclusion reached will be closely examined by a community that continues to demand transparency and accountability. Meanwhile, the conversation has grown beyond one intersection in Madison. It has become part of a much larger national discussion about policing, the use of force, officer safety, public trust, and whether more can be done to prevent deadly encounters before they happen. As people continue to debate what happened that afternoon, one fact remains unchanged. A man left home on July 22, 2026, and never returned. For those who knew Corey Ruiz, that loss will never become just another headline. And until the investigation is complete, the search for answers continues.